Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the K-12 Digital Learning Landscape. My name is Kara Jenkins. I'm your host. I'm with IMS Global Learning Consortium. Our session today, we have both representatives from IMS as well as from the Digital Learning Collaborative and from the Georgia Department of Education. So you'll learn a little bit about both organizations, and you'll hear from Georgia Virtual School at the Georgia Department of Education, who is a member of both organizations. We hope you'll find this information very useful. We look forward to your feedback. We're hoping to look for some alignments and opportunities for both our organizations and members of both organizations to work together moving forward. So we love to hear your feedback. We'd love to entertain your questions. You can use the Q&A feature in the Zoom to ask your questions. You can also use the chat, and we will address your questions throughout. So with that, I'd like to turn the session over to today's first speaker, Karen Daugherty.
Thank you, Kara, and welcome again to everybody who is in attendance. We are excited to share with you more information about IMS Global, as well as the Digital Learning Collaborative, and are excited to hopefully work with those of you on the call in the future. So I'm going to start off giving you some background information about IMS Global, who we are, what we do, and the kind of work that we are hoping to accomplish. And then we'll turn it over to John, who will share with us a little bit more about his work. In IMS Global, we are a nonprofit membership consortium, and we are run by leading districts, states, universities, suppliers, all as equal partners. Very unique aspect of IMS Global, where all of those entities are working side by side for that market change agent. We've been working for over 20 years in the areas of learning platforms, e-assessment, digital curriculum, learning analytics, micro-credentials, and together IMS enables better digital learning experiences through both through all the digital transformation strategies, the seamless plug and play integrations, and then that open architecture and extensive ecosystem. Everything that IMS Global develops, they are open standards, which mean they are open and available to any and all who wish to implement them. We'll talk a little bit more about the benefits and in-depth initiatives that IMS members are working on. Again, this collaborative is made up of that membership of districts, states, K-12 organizations, all the way up through universities, as well as our ed tech suppliers. And together, we are working on these key initiative areas. All of our members are defining and adopting and evolving an integrated environment that our ultimate goal is to enable better teaching and learning. And all of our efforts focus on this complete set of foundational initiatives. We're going to take a look at each one of these individually, and hopefully there is something around the work that we're doing that is of specific interest to you. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to jot them down or put them in the chat window, and then when I'm done going through all of these, we'll call out and see if you guys have any questions. The first initiative is around digital credentials and pathways. Digital credentials are reshaping the way education thinks about the way we educate our students and how we develop our professionals in teaching. So through education and professional development, IMS is committed to this area in furthering that adoption of innovative solutions that support that true competency-based education. We want to make sure there's transferability in those learner micro-credentials across all institutions, even when it comes to non-traditional learning opportunities all the way through employment opportunities. Below each one of these slides, you'll see the IMS Global standards that have been developed around these initiatives in these areas of work. Learning data and analytics is an initiative we're seeing a huge growth in K-12. It's very popular in higher ed, but K-12 is starting to see a large boom. We all want that clickstream learning data, and we want it from all of our digital resources, and we want it available in real time, and we want it viewable from any dashboard, and we really need that data at our fingertips to help us inform student success, the strategies we use with students, the institutional decisions that we make, the way we design our instruction, and we want that data to be in a common format that we can use and analyze to research our student learning. And IMS is focused on providing that foundation to make this happen. The IMS work around integrated assessment is revolutionizing assessment by providing technical specifications that enable high quality, interoperable digital assessment, and that includes formative as well as summative. And we've been working on this area for well over 20 years, continuing to make great strides with this as teachers and leaders in our area are making it well known that true assessment comes from all forms of assessment, and there's a variety of ways to gather that data. And through IMS open standards, we are increasing that the quality and integrating actionable assessments into the daily lives of teachers and students. Learning platforms, apps, and tools. As educators in all areas, we work with all of these. And the work in this area ensures that our community, again, of higher ed, K-12, government agencies, ed tech suppliers, all of us working together to enable all of our tools, all of our assessment products into our digital learning environment, or sometimes we call that our digital ecosystem. And this is really where the big word of interoperability comes in. And that truly is at the heart of what we do. IMS Global strives to make things all interoperable so that we have this seamless integration so that we can support the next generation of teaching and learning. And as information is exchanged in the teaching and learning workflow, we want, we provide the tools, the standards that are listed there, such as learning tools interoperability, to help with that transfer of information and that direct connection into those learning tools. IMS members are getting to the future faster by enabling that adaptive digital curriculum and integrating that adaptive digital curriculum. IMS interoperability standards enable various types of digital curriculum resources and all of those digital learning tools to be seamlessly integrated into an enterprise system that you already have in place or that you are planning to bring into place in your organization. Integrating all that IMS has to offer and knowing about all of these initiatives, and as I poked through some of these slides and you saw the standards that are available, it's often very overwhelming for institutions to fully grasp that understanding of how these standards play a role in their organization, the instructional impact they make, and the difference they make in their the time that they spend, the amount of money that they spend doing their integrations. IMS Global has developed what we call our Digital Learning Revolution Program. And with this program, we are here to help. We're here to help all members in their adoption and implementation of all things IMS, so that you have that digital ecosystem that uses IMS open standards to bring in your integrations. This program is a simple, incremental, if you will, evolution of instructional practices at each level. And our goal with this program is to meet all of our institutions where they are and help them accelerate their and make their teaching practices relevant, rigorous, and innovative. Each one of our areas of our program are full of resources, both resources that have been created by members, as well as resources that we have gathered in the form of articles and publications. Perhaps it's a webinar presentation, full of resources that help you where you are as you are learning to integrate open standards into your current system. As I said, all of these resources were created by IMS Global members. We have playbook resources both for K-12 as well as higher ed. And this is something that is invaluable to our members as they're looking for procurement languages. So many of us are doing the same thing, you know, as the saying says, why would we reinvent the wheel? Finding these resources in our playbook brings together that collaborative effort of organizations just like you who have gone down that path, created resources that are now beneficial and useful to where you are. We want to make sure that as you are integrating various tools into your ecosystem and you are looking for new products, we want to make sure all of your EdTech product integrations are secure, and we want to make sure that they are fully interoperable. We want to make sure that those vendors and suppliers are telling you the truth and promising what you are truly going to get once you implement their product. We have our certified product directory, which is the official listing of all products that have gone through the rigorous IMS certification process to ensure their interoperability and their security. The certified product directory also provides app vetting resources for districts to help districts lighten the load when it comes to vetting the numerous applications that are being requested by teachers and schools within the district. And members are able to peek at our certified product directory, not only to see that product certification, to see what standards they're certified to, what level of the standard they're certified to. They can see a list of other compatible products that will integrate with that specific product, as well as any app vetting details that have taken place around that particular tool. So with that, I'm about to turn it over to John, but before I do, I'm going to ask and then also take a peek. Kara, has there been any questions as I was blowing through some of those slides and sharing the initiatives of IMS Global?
No questions so far. Thanks, Karen.
Wonderful. Well, if you do have any questions, we will have our contact information at the end of the presentation. And then also, if you think of anything else, just jot it down in chat and we will address it after John is speaking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Watson with the Digital Learning Collaborative.
Thank you, Karen. And folks, thanks for joining us today. Again, this is John Watson with the Evergreen Education Group. We run the Digital Learning Collaborative, as well as a conference that I will be talking about shortly. As I mentioned in the chat window, it's great to see a lot of names and organizations that I recognize, and even more so to see a lot of folks that I don't recognize. I just want to take about 10 minutes here to talk about some of the work that we are doing. I will echo Karen's point from earlier that we are watching the chat window, so if you have any questions about what we're doing, please feel free to jump in at any moment. In my slides, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also work in some of the findings around the type of reporting that we're doing. I want to start though by just mentioning the Digital Learning Collaborative, the DLC, exists because as of about a year and a half ago, there was a feeling among a lot of experienced, a variety of folks of different levels of experience involved in online learning, blended learning, digital learning, who felt that there was a gap in the available information around our field. And we then worked with a bunch of folks that we know to pull together the DLC, which is a membership group made up of, we're adding people, organizations I should say, so we're somewhere between 25 and 30 now, a variety of individual schools, districts, providers, companies, state agencies. Thank you, Michael Barber, for putting the URL in there. And if you are surfing around while I'm talking, you can see the members listed and a variety of other background information on the collaborative. So we are member driven, and we exist in order to primarily fill that information gap. I've been running Evergreen for, well, pretty soon we'll be entering our 20th year, which is a long time in any field, and particularly a long time in this field. And what we pretty consistently find is there's a wide variety of people who are just constantly seeking information. That's some of the folks that I recognize on this call have been doing this for a while, always looking for what's the latest, what's happening, what's going on, also looking for background information that they may be able to share with folks who are perhaps a little less experienced, but whether they're superintendents, school board members, etc. Our goal is to be a source for that information. We sometimes say we're trying to be unbiased, although I would say we actually are biased in the sense that we believe digital learning in its various forms and fashions can be beneficial to students. We also believe that digital learning in its various forms doesn't have to be beneficial to students. It's all about implementation, and we try to help highlight good implementations and talk about some issues in poor implementations as well. The next slide highlights a couple of the reports that we're working on, and Karen and Kara, I want to make sure you're going to the next slide on the screen. Thank you. We published our first major report, the 2019 SnapShot. That's the collaborative's annual report. For those of you who have been around for a while, you may remember the keeping pace reports that we at Evergreen used to do. In a sense, the collaborative is a digital first effort to recreate a lot of the information that was in the keeping pace reports. We'll be issuing that snapshot annually. It's much shorter than the old keeping pace reports used to be, and I'll touch in a minute on what some of the things are that we cover in there. But we're also doing a lot of additional reports for the media, for schools, for policymakers, as well as blogging, podcasting, and other ways of building a community that's contributing to information creation and dissemination. The Planning for Quality guide that you see there on the screen as well is we were working with the Wisconsin eSchool Network and several school districts in Wisconsin around developing a quality guide and around both planning and implementation. And so we've recreated those for a national audience and put those on the website as well. Other information on the next slide. Some of you may recognize a graph that looks, a mapping graph that looks like this. The Keeping Pace reports for many years were the main source of data around how many students and how many students are attending fully online schools, for instance. We have recreated that. So the map on your screen shows the states that have full-time online schools and the numbers of students enrolled in those types of schools in each state that allow those schools. The next slide, we spent a lot of time trying to think about what's happening with digital learning in mainstream school districts. And in the snapshot, we put together a set of use cases around school districts that are using some form of online or blended learning to address equity issues, for instance, in Bellevue, in Washington, increasing graduation rates in Albany, New York, thinking about personalizing learning in Horry County schools, serving at-risk students out in California, and other cases as well. One of the main areas in which we operate and we think quite a bit about the field as a whole is that we see a set of state virtual schools, online schools, whether they're charter schools or district schools, some alt-ed programs and independent study programs that are doing some of the most interesting work, I would say, in the digital learning field and arguably in all of education. We think about how does that type of innovative work scale in ways that are going to be successful and able to reach more students. So we think a lot about what are the ways that some of the programs that many of you are working in are able to get into the more mainstream part of the district, let's say with the curriculum and instruction folks across the district, with the technology folks across the district, thinking about those instructional applications. At the same time, and I would say this perhaps comes because a lot of our roots tend to be on the online side of things, thinking about how some of the most innovative and successful schools are really breaking down barriers of time and space, and how can they continue to do that and bring those opportunities to more and more students. In fact, on the next slide, I'll highlight a map. We looked at a handful of what we called hybrid schools. This is, again, case studies that we did in the snapshot, the 2019 snapshot. And I see Catherine has put in the URL where all these reports are available. Thank you, Catherine. We're defining hybrid schools as specifically mixing online and face-to-face, eliminating barriers of time and space, and really being able to promote student interests and engagement, because some of these schools are, in some cases, they're located on community college campuses. In other cases, they are very, very actively working with their students who have interests in jobs, internships, arts, sports, that sort of thing. We think quite a bit about student engagement and have really come to believe that the best way to engage a student has to do with helping students think about their future and what they need to be doing to get there. And we've had some incredible conversations with students in some of these schools about their interests. And I can tell you, when a student's got her, let's say a high school student's got her eyes on what's happening next and what kind of AA degree she's working towards and what four-year school that she's going to go to after that, these are students who aren't asking, why do I need this course? They're engaged. They know why they need them, and they are really doing quite well. And so the question is, how do we help scale more of these examples? How do we showcase more of these examples? How do we spread the word about them and make sure that that digital learning broadly is meeting the needs of as many schools and students as possible. On the next slide, we also look at, again, in the snapshot, states with state virtual schools, which you can see on the slide here. The Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance is a group of state virtual schools and some other organizations. Cindy Hamlin's on the webinar today as well. She's runs the VLLA. They have been instrumental with us in developing, in capturing the data that makes up this section as well. Those are, so far I've been talking about reports that are currently posted on the site, and I want to switch gears and on the next slide talk about the report that it's either just up as of today or will be up in the next day or two. We put together a report on course choice and looking at the states that have some sort of course choice policy or program in place. This, I would say, is another example of an area that we're trying to shine a light on in a way that says, and when we talk about course choice, what we're talking about is state policies that allow a student to choose an online course and have that portion of her public education funding flow to the provider. There has not been much information about course choice programs and policies out recently, and so we're trying to rectify that with this report that's coming out. I know we've got some folks from the launch program in Springfield in Missouri who are very involved in essentially in working with districts across Missouri, just as one example. So I appreciate you folks being on as well. So that's a set of some of the reports that we're working on. On the next slide, I want to just mention, and I touched on this earlier, we are also really trying to create an ongoing community of bloggers, podcasters, folks weighing in on Twitter, and so if you're interested in guest blogging, on being on the podcast, in suggesting a topic, you'll see Catherine in the chat window has given her email address, and you should please get in touch. On the right there, another way of joining the conversation is through the conference that we launched earlier in 2019. The next slide talks about the Digital Learning Annual Conference, or DLAC. We started DLAC because, again, we felt like there was a gap in a conference that people who are thinking about digital learning at a school or system level would be interested in taking part in. And then secondly, we felt like most education conferences that are larger than 50 or 100 people tend to be very much built around hour-long lectures. And we thought, well, we're preaching about how learning should be about conversations and interaction and personalization. Let's build a conference that way. So our basic session time at DLAC is 20 minutes, and that includes a required 5 minutes of discussion. And we have a lot of different types of sessions as well, ranging from 15-minute lectures to, we call them table talks. There's no AV at all. It's just a bunch of people around a small table talking about a topic that somebody's leading the discussion on. So we're going to wrap up with a couple of quick thoughts. First of all, I got ahead of myself a little bit. These are the types of sessions at DLAC that I was mentioning. Won't run through them all. This is all available on the website that Catherine mentioned as well. On the next slide, I will also mention that the deadline for conference proposals was earlier this week, but we have an opportunity to extend at least a little bit into the end of this week and Monday. So if there's anybody on this call who hasn't been able to put in a proposal and would like to, shoot me an email and we will make that happen. The other thing I want to mention on the next slide that may be of interest to some people who are with districts is we are running a program specifically for superintendents at DLAC. This is going to be sort of a concierge service for superintendents in a sense, a conference within a conference, not separate programming for them, but a facilitated opportunity for them to better understand what their opportunities are and what the sorts of things that they could be doing across the district. So to summarize in my last slide here, the next slide and last slide, there are a lot of ways for all of you to be getting involved. I know some of you already are. You can present at DLAC. Please attend DLAC if not able to present, because there's so many opportunities to take part. Joining the collaborative if you would like, and there's membership information on the site. But as well, even if you don't want to become a member, submitting a blog post, suggesting a podcast, signing up for the newsletter, and then finally, tell us what you need. We are always interested in hearing from individual schools and programs about what your needs and interests are. We are here to serve member needs and would love to hear from you if you feel like there's something that we're missing. With that, I am going to turn it over to Jay Heap, who's the Director of Virtual Learning at the Georgia Department of Education. Jay and his organization are involved with both IMS and the Digital Learning Collaborative. I'm going to give Jay a chance to talk about some of the work that he and Georgia Virtual are doing.
Thank you, John. I want to take a second to thank John and Karen for having me. While the demographic slide is up there, I think that as a virtual school, we are not unique. There are several things that I hope to talk about in the next couple minutes that should resonate with some of the challenges and experiences that you may have in your state or district or school or program. And so on the next slide, it talks about several of the technology challenges that I think are addressed. I think one of the key things to us as a state virtual school is to participate in these national organizations. And when we do that, we get both the opportunities to help integrate consistency through technology and standards through IMS, as well as the research and the networking that the DLC allows us to do to make sure what we're doing is actually right and effective. So, we have a lot of these technology challenges of making sure that the student learning platform and environment is the best it can be, how we can make all of our systems talk to each other in our applications, how do we get good data to make decisions on and moving forward with what we plan to do? How can we align standards as we work with Georgia? What does that look like within Georgia and outside of Georgia? And certainly some of the things of getting our material. Georgia is one of the largest open educational resource providers. We have about 100 course content that is freely available to anyone who wants to use it. And so how do we package that and get that out so it's most effective? And also, how do we implement digital learning credentials or badges into what we're doing? So the next slide talks a little bit about our digital learning platforms, and not regardless of the platform that you choose, I think the importance is that these platforms deliver consistent learning experiences for students and teachers, and I think it's very important. One thing that we found through looking at various platforms and talking with folks both at the IMS conference and the DLAC conference that John talked about is that there are various common threads throughout these platforms, and that makes it very helpful as teachers and students transition from a face-to-face to a blended or hybrid opportunity, and then students or teachers who may be experiencing an online opportunity. After that, we also talk about integrated data systems and how it's important. And certainly we haven't gotten to perfection yet in our program, but we're certainly taking the steps necessary and educating ourselves to assure that our student information systems and learning platforms and other types of systems are all engaged to analyze not only student but teacher performance so that we can do the very best that we can do to improve learning and also teaching models. While online learning and blended learning has been around for a while, there's still a lot of improvement and research to be done on how it can most effectively provide a quality experience to all students through this process. Standard alignment is also very important. Certainly as a standard provider from the state, our standards do get populated throughout our school districts. How we can do that is extremely important, and the ability to make those standards machine readable so that districts can consume those and use those quickly and help align them to the things that they're doing to not only personalize instruction, but also to align their micro-credentials through badging or learning pathways. We also want to make sure, like I said, that we provide a lot of OER material. So we want to make sure that how we move that around makes it available for everyone, regardless of the platform or system that you're using. And IMS certainly provides those standards to make the interoperability happen. And the more folks we talk to, the more opportunity we have to understand what the needs are in the systems. So the more we can get together and have these conversations and then understand how they're working, the better off we'll be. Our digital credential part, and that's probably the last part I'll talk about, we're certainly trying to push forward as a state organization and as an online supplemental school, the digital credentials. We have seen this area growing quite a bit, the badging and the learning pathways, and the opportunity for us to really look at competency levels and really show what learners, whether they're students or teachers, have really been able to do. And we feel very comfortable that the learning pathway is really going to be the next piece of defining education and what students have learned and how their skills stack up to careers. So again, thank you, John and Karen, very much for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to work with both of these organizations to continue to provide quality materials for students across the state and the nation.
It looks like we just have one question so far, and John, I think this is for you. So it looks like Digital Learning Collaborative is relatively new, but blended and online learning has been around for a while. Is there a reason or specific impetus for organizations like DLC to be starting these conversations now?
Yeah, it's a great question. For many years, we worked very closely with INACOL, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the webinar today are familiar with INACOL. A lot of us at Evergreen were involved with INACOL from the start, and in fact helped start INACOL, as did at least a couple of folks again on this call. Recently, in the last couple of years, INACOL has shifted towards having a focus on competency-based learning primarily, and it's our sense that, and not just our sense, we've heard this from a lot of people in the field, feeling like although there's overlap between competency-based learning and digital learning, that there's a lot of schools and programs that are doing some form of digital and don't feel like competency is really within reach. And so the way we look at it, with the way we look at our role, both within the collaborative and the DLAC conference, is to be a source for essentially everybody that's using online blended or digital learning in some way. And we take the instructional concept of zone of proximal development. The idea that if you're working with a second grade student who is learning, or let's just say generally an elementary student who's learning how to multiply 2-digit numbers, you're not going to try to teach that student calculus. Well, if you're a school that's focused on using digital for credit recovery, competency-based learning across the board may be out of reach. But we think that there's room for making that credit recovery better. There's room for thinking about how to take some of those ideas and about using, let's say, online or blended to reach more students. So it's all about just helping schools meet students and just do a little better job. We think there's a lot of room for that, and we're still continuing to work with INACOL in the sense that we feel like as a lot of individual schools and districts move down that path, eventually they may be interested in competency. So we continue to talk with them a lot and feel like there's a lot of back and forth in terms of the organizations that we're able to serve.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, John, for that. There's a question. Are there any hints about future reports or topics or projects that DLC or DLAC or Evergreen are contemplating? What's in the future?
We have a longer list than we can possibly get to, but I will mention one that's teed up. We've already drafted it, and that's around e-learning days. There's a set of states that are now allowing districts to have what they call an e-learning day, a day where students don't have to attend school but can get some instruction online. And the states are allowing districts to count that for instructional time for attendance and funding purposes. And we think that there's some fantastic opportunities there, and also some major pitfalls if those types of things aren't done well. So that one is drafted and coming. And we think that will apply to a lot of mainstream districts, particularly in the dozen or so states that are down the path of allowing this. After that, we've got plans to do a report around online and blended school accountability. We don't have a time frame on that one yet, but it does feel like there's been ongoing issues around whether state accountability systems are able to address some of the issues with online and blended schools, whether they're charter and statewide or district run. So that's in the works, but no time frame on that yet. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we really see the community aspect of the blogging, the newsletter, the podcasts, possibly some webinars that we'll be adding as well as a central part of what we're doing also. Key theme within both the collaborative and DLAC is there's tremendous knowledge within the practitioners in this field, and we want to surface that information and find ways to help people share it among each other.
Thanks again, John. So it looks like we've reached the end of our session time. Encourage everyone, if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to any of our speakers from today's webinar. And I'd like to thank you all for your participation and attention, and have a great rest of your day.